Yeah, the first question. I want to know what the situation of your business in 2009, our global health crisis. Yeah.
Okay, in 2009, maybe it is better to look at not just our business, but what was facing the tourism business in Singapore.
Yes.
2009 was the year where the two integrated resorts opened. One. Two, there was a global crisis started in September 2008.
Yes.
Right, that was the Lehman Brothers. Actually, the HSBC was a bit earlier than Lehman Brothers. Then I think the dominoes started to fall in early 2009. The situation was very apprehensive. At that moment, I think we were looking at two types of competition. One was an economic, financial competition or crisis, which all businesses in tourism, because we're considered a luxury product, we were anticipating that people will stop coming to Singapore because of the meltdown.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we were also thinking that Singaporeans are unlikely to spend much money. They want to constrain because they want to preserve. And therefore, domestic tourism is likely to go down. However, in 2009 and 2010, the reverse happened. Because of the integrated resort and all the promotions, there was an influx of tourists coming into Singapore. Second, actually the very important thing is not just the tourists coming in, but also Singaporeans in turn didn't feel the impact of the global economic crisis. Instead, they were traveling a lot more, and we were spending more money in Singapore. So the reverse actually happened. Instead of like in the manufacturing, in the banking sectors that were gone down, but in tourism in Singapore actually went up. 2009, 2010 were our best years.
Oh, really?
So the reverse happened.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, I think for starters, Singapore's economy is quite insulated from global borrowings, the global debt issues. We are not as exposed to banking crisis. We don't have bank runs. I think whole of Southeast Asia, other than in the 80s when there was the trouble in Bangkok, and also in the early 90s with Malaysia, the past 15-20 years, the banking sector has been very conservative in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
We were not overly leveraged. Our fiscal and our monetary policies were very tight. Yeah, we were not borrowing to build things. So we were not in, and for example, India is also not exposed to that crisis. China also. Why? Japan also. Why? Because we don't borrow to build things. Not like in the West, you see. So the global meltdown was really more in particular America and the foreign banks. Our local banks were very conservative. So that we were insulated, first thing. Second thing is, because it's Asia, Southeast Asia is contained, and because the Southeast Asians knew Singapore was coming out two casinos, it's a new product, Universal Studios opening, everyone wanted to come to Singapore. So the reverse happened. We were anticipating a meltdown. We were, as business owners, we were prepared for the business to go down. But it actually went up.
So what's the plan that you prepared at the time?
What we did in 2008, we actually managed our costs. Okay, we cut down a lot of we didn't replace full-time staff. We replaced them with part-time staff, so we became more elastic. In the past, we would have about 80% full-time staff and 20% part-time. Today, we are 50-50. So I will only incur that cost, the manpower cost, if I have more traffic or more customers. So that was what we did in 2008, 2009. Because in our business, our fixed cost is very high. The only one or two variable costs, one of them, the biggest variable cost is manpower. So that's the only thing which we can scale. Yeah. So that was our strategy. But it didn't need to take place.
So for another business, because you are president of so
whole industry went up. The whole industry.
Nothing to do.
No, there was no need well, there was no need for
no
any
plan for increase the tourists. No.
No, the plan from the Singapore standpoint, because of the two integrated resorts, there were already more people coming. So all of us benefited from it. We anticipated that the two integrated resorts will take away our business, but actually the reverse happened. The pie or the number of tourists coming to Singapore increased. And therefore we all benefited from it.
That means that time you didn't work hard because of the global crisis for tourism.
No.
Because it reversed, you said that.
The reverse happened.
So if you look ahead in the future, what is the attraction of Singapore?
Well, okay, I think one of the problems with Singapore is we don't have natural tourist attractions. We don't have a culture like Thailand, for example, okay, where people want to come and enjoy the land of smiles. Okay, they're not there because there's a royal palace you can visit, for example. There's a river that you can see the for example the floating market, for example. We don't have the hinterland of, let's say, Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, and we don't have the beach resorts. Whereas in Singapore, everything is manufactured. So virtually everything that we have is something which somebody else might have. Maybe bigger, smaller, or slightly different. Like museums, for example. Rides. You can find these rides anywhere in the world. So moving ahead, the challenge for Singapore as a product, as a destination, we need to find unique products which cannot be duplicated anywhere in the world. So it becomes continual. So that, let's say for example, I go to Borneo, okay? I go to Sabah, Sarawak. The Borneo is rainforest place, for example. So the forest will always be there, and this forest is the unique forest called Borneo. I can go to the Amazon, it's a different forest. So that's something unique to Borneo. Whereas what is unique to Singapore?
What is that?
So we need to find those products. Another example is this, London. Everything is manufactured also. But London, New York, Paris, big cities, Rome, they have natural history, architecture, they have the lifestyle of the people. So I think one thing unique about Singapore would be our lifestyle also. So is that something which foreigners might want to come and see? So I see that not just for Singapore but for the world, tourism is no longer just a fixed attraction, but you actually want to go there and understand culture. You want to understand how the people there live, just like in Bangkok, right? Or in Thailand, where the floating market is not there because of the tourists. They're there because of the people living. Chatuchak, for example, right? This is how people, shopkeepers, buy their goods, right? Because it is a lifestyle. So it is not a tourist attraction. So we go there to experience the lifestyle, the culture, and the surroundings of how people live. And that's sustainable tourism. And that's what we in Singapore should be looking for the future. What is that unique thing that foreigners, tourists would want to see about Singapore and learn about Singapore. So, which is unique to us. For example, how Singapore is so multicultural. I think that's one part. Second could be our hawker centers, for example. This is exactly how the HDB and how Singaporeans live in a concrete jungle, but we actually preserve certain parts of our lifestyle. Yeah. So I think that's more sustainable, because you can build the biggest, the longest, but when does it stop? Because somebody else will build something bigger. And I think in the early 2000s up to 2007, 2008, Dubai tried to do that. The Middle East tried to build the biggest, the longest. Is it sustainable? No. Because everything is manufactured. You can only be biggest once until somebody else builds something bigger and taller than you. But if you are naturally the tallest mountain in the world, called Mount Everest, can there be a taller mountain than you? Because it is natural. Anything artificial can be duplicated. It is just an engineering challenge. Right? What if it's natural? Well, God gave it to you.
So in my idea, Singapore is like an expensive city. This is a weak point for tourism.
Okay. This is an important point. London is always expensive. New York is expensive. Paris, Milan, Seoul is expensive. But why do they still go there? So if it is unique, if the things that you do is unique, is uniquely found in London, you would pay the difference. But if you can find the same experience somewhere else, you will compare it to something which is cheaper. And cheaper may come in two ways. Not just the amount of money you spend in the city, but also how much you spend to get to that city. So, for example, if I were to compare Singapore being expensive compared with, for example, Australia. Okay, Australia has a very strong dollar right now. But for the Thais, for example, or for Malaysians, the cost of coming to Singapore is still cheaper than going to Sydney, or Melbourne, or Brisbane, or Gold Coast. Although you may spend the same amount of money in the same city, but the cost of travel is cheaper. So the total cost of your experience is still lower in Singapore. And this is where we have to look at which markets we should be targeting. But more importantly, like I said in the earlier part, where we need to focus on the unique experiences. If you cannot compare and it's unique to this city, to this country, then you are experiencing something once in a lifetime. And then the price is more worth it, isn't it? True? So, but having said that, yes, a strong currency does not help tourism. But it makes us rethink not just about fighting a price war, but we should be fighting a unique and a value war. Right? And we should relook at our products and say, what can we do to be unique, to be special? Then spending the extra 20-30% is worthwhile. Then we provide value for money.
In your opinion, what is the best unit of Singapore? The best.
For different target markets, I think we will have different things. This was maybe about 12 years ago, and a little girl from India, I saw a group of Indians, they were Indian tourist school children, maybe about 8 to 10 years old, and one little girl came up to me and she pulled my shirt, and she asked me, "Is that man Indian?" I said, "Yes." "Are you Chinese?" "Yes." She asked me, "Why is it that both of you can work together?" Then I asked her why. And this is a very young girl. And she said, in my country, if you're a different race, you don't even live together on the same street. You can't even walk together. Because the religion stops you from doing that. There's too many cultural differences. So I think one of the unique things about Singapore is how multicultural we are. What we take for granted is something, I think, in today's context of terrorism and extreme racial differences. What we take for granted every day, that a Malay lives with a Chinese and lives with an Indian, and a Caucasian is living with you, and a foreigner is living all in the same community. What we take for granted every day is something we need to celebrate. That is something which is unique to us.
Yes.
That next to a church, there is also a mosque. Across the street, there is a temple.
Right.
So this is something which I think we need to celebrate. We should start looking at communities. We don't celebrate the church, but we celebrate the communities that people live together.
Right.
And that, for example, how long have you lived in Singapore? A few months?
Yeah, 3 months.
3 months, okay. And you go to a hawker center or food court.
Yes.
You see a Malay eating with an Indian, with a Chinese, and each of us having our own different food. And we are sharing also.
Yeah.
Now, this is very unique to Singapore, isn't it? So I think the culture, our lifestyle, how we live as Singaporeans, no longer as Indians, Malays and Chinese, but as a nation, is unique. And we need to work on that.
Yeah. It seems Singaporean are like a foreigner now.
I think we need to look at the difference between politics and the difference between reality. The reality is we are a country that needs to import and export. We have nothing that we can take from the land. We don't grow rice like Thailand. We don't have seafood. We don't have minerals. We only have humans. Now, if you need to create an economy out of humans, then we, as Singaporeans, we must accept that what we trade are not humans. What we trade is the intellectual ability, the economic contribution of every individual. And that is what we should be promoting. That when we invite a foreigner into our country, of course, and I always believe this, that the foreigner must try to live the Singaporean culture. But we must welcome them because this person has something to contribute to our society in economic terms, okay, and in intellectual terms. But to me, the most important thing that the foreigner contributes is competition. Because if it is through competition that we improve ourselves, it is through competition we try harder, right? And because we have nothing, we have to continually compete, not with the world, but with ourselves. Because that's what we're producing. We are producing intellectual capability. Our export is intellectual, it's economic terms. There is no real product. Our output is what we can do. And so imagine that if we are not, Singapore is a place where we produce sportsmen. So we need to continually break new world records. We need to continually become number one in many things so that our sports people are more valuable overseas, right? So the only way is to continually maintain the competition. So that, I think, we have to differentiate. In reality, this is what we need to do. Of course, in terms of common people, the opinion that they have about foreigners, foreign talent taking away their jobs, I think we need to ask ourselves another question. Are they taking away the jobs that we want or the jobs that we don't want? And if that's the case, we should ask ourselves, why don't we want to do that job? So this is something I think before we start criticizing foreigners, we should ask ourselves, why do we have that opinion in the first place?
I heard that Singaporeans like to work in service sector.
Okay, I think this is two parts. I think two parts to why Singaporeans don't like service sector. Number one, since 1819 to 1963, okay, almost 150 years, we were under the British rule. Okay? And for 150 years, and before that, we have no history in Singapore. I mean, no modern history. Not like in Thailand, for example. You have over 1,000 years of monarchy, for example, or hundreds of years, right? For the only history that we know is from 1819 to 1963-65, right? Before independence. So over 150 years, because of colonialism, okay, because of British colonial rule, Singaporeans were servants to the British masters. So when you become independent, and that's the only history that you know, your thinking is, do you want to be a servant or do you want to be a master?
Me?
For example, for Singaporean, you don't want to be a servant anymore. Now we want to be masters, right?
Ah, yes, yes.
Second important thing is our education system constantly reminds us that if you study hard, you go through your education, you get academic qualification,
Yes.
you get a degree, you get a master's, and therefore you get a good job. You don't need to work in certain jobs.
Yes, yes.
So you add these two together, there is no service culture. You add these two together, that means Singaporeans don't have a natural desire to go into the service industry. Everyone wants to be a master. Everyone wants to be a manager. Isn't it? So historically and post-war or post-independence, our education system conditions us to think that way. So the concept of service professional, a person in the service business who is considered a professional, does not exist in Singapore's mindset. Or at least, only now we start to talk about it. Okay, so that's where I think the problems are. So we need to change that.
Aging society is a problem.
Aging society is a problem in any developed country. It is a natural cycle of almost every developed or developing to developed country. Why? Well, if you look at social economics, people tend to be more qualified. They get married later.
Yes.
Women marry upwards, they don't marry downwards. So marriages become smaller, lesser, older. Therefore, what will happen is your birth rate will reduce. Your fertility rate will definitely reduce. So what will happen over time, from a developing country to a developed status, an aging population will come in. Because what we used to be used to is maybe big families with 4, 5, 6 children, 7 children. Like my family was 3, now I have only 1 child. Why? Because of the cycle. So aging population is a problem. It's a reality of any developed country. I think if you do your research, the whole of Europe has the same problem. The whole of America has the same problem. Japan had that problem for many years. Korea will be getting into that problem very soon. Right? Some parts of Southeast Asia, Singapore will be the first one. Okay? If you look at the Middle East, they are moving towards that status. China will have the biggest aging population, not because of the developed status, because of the one-child policy. So it is the reality of the world. How we deal with it, I think this is where foreigners coming in. All right, we need to artificially create new population. If your birth rate is less than 2.01, why 2.01? If husband and wife gets married, they don't have at least 2 children, they can't replace themselves. So you need at least 2.01 to grow a population, right? Mathematically. So if your birth rate is less than 2, you are in trouble. You cannot even replace yourself. So the only way is to increase population by having foreigners coming in. right? And then that's the only way. The basics of GDP growth is consumption. So if the consumption goes up, GDP will grow. And if consumption goes, GDP goes up, inflation will go up. And inflation becomes new wealth. The price of goods will continue go up at a certain rate. So social economics is interlinked with macroeconomics.
So the last question, how the business in Singapore, I mean, in terms of tourism, deal with Singapore Tourism Board? In my idea, I think Singapore Tourism Board is like the leader, and I don't know, they just build up new things always. That's the point of them. Just that, yeah.
Okay, I think the role of Singapore Tourism Board. First, I think for us it's unclear. Are they the people to promote tourism? Are they here to champion our industry, or are they here to regulate us? Okay. So I think the role needs to be very clear. At the same time, I think I always believe that I have always had this belief that if the business and the demand of the business, consumer demand is real, commercial activity will grow.
Yes.
So I believe that the role of STB or Singapore Tourism Board should not interfere with the commercial growth, but to help commercial growth. They should not be participating inside, but they should be facilitating new growth. So I see STB's role as not a regulator. Okay, and I'll explain why. I see STB's role more as a growth facilitator. Yeah. Excuse me. How do they help us to grow? How do they help to promote Singapore as a destination and facilitate that? Okay. I don't see them as a regulator because in the tourism business, whether it's a hotel, an attraction, a travel agency, or an airline, I mean, these are the most basic components, okay, of tourism. You cannot regulate them to the point where they don't become creative. It is because of creativity that tourism will grow. You have more interesting boutique hotels, for example. You have very unique attractions which cannot be seen in the world. That's the reason why people go to a certain country, because there are unique things to go to visit, to experience. So if they regulate too much, and they participate in the commercial activity, you actually kill creativity. That's why they should facilitate the growth to enhance creativity, and it's through creativity that we create new products. Nobody goes to a country because there are old products which are not unique. They go there because they are new, they're interesting, and they are unique experiences. So the role of STB needs to change, and I think moving forward, this is something that all of us really need to think clearly about. What is their role? What is their relationship with us as the product owners, and what is their relationship with the world as destination marketers or destination promoters?
So business and STB go along well together. In Thailand, no. Yeah, then I ask you.
Okay, to answer that question, I think we are like two brothers and sisters. We need each other, but at the same time, we want to be independent. But at the same time, we know that we need each other's help. So we have a love and a hate relationship. So I think this is something which we need to realize. That's why we need to understand each other's roles better. Of course, to Singapore Tourism Board, they may have something to say about our industry, that we probably want too much or whatever it might be. So we have a love and hate relationship. Yeah, but we must realize one thing. We need each other.
Right.
Why? The promoter needs products to promote. True?
True.
If not, there's no reason to come to Singapore.
Yeah.
The product owners knows that I cannot reach the world on my own. I need a promoter.
Yeah.
Without the promoter, my cost of marketing my product is too high. True?
Yeah.
So we must understand that I'm a product owner. Let me focus on my product in making sure that my product is good. I provide safety, I provide unique experiences, I provide good service, for example. And I can manage my cost so that it becomes the price of the product becomes good or attractive.
Yeah.
And the promoter must understand that that is not his job.
Yeah.
His job is to promote what I have,
Yeah.
not to influence how I do my job.
Yeah.
True?
Yeah.
So this is where the relationship needs to be very clear.
Not say in Thailand. Yeah.
Well, I think in Thailand, because the businesses are used to being independent.
Right.
Yeah? And I think also in Thailand, like many big countries, do you promote Chiang Mai, or do you promote Bangkok, or Hua Hin, or Krabi, or Phuket, or Pattaya? So the tourism board in Bangkok, or head in Bangkok, which part of Bangkok or which part of Thailand do you promote? There's always that problem. Okay, now for most, I always go by the easiest way to promote a city is through its airport, because that is the first place that people go to. And if there, for example, if you can go to the outskirts, okay, Chonburi for example, there's no airport there. How do I get there? But you need to promote Bangkok first to promote there. True? So the gateway, the access, is the critical part to promote first. So that comes with working with land operators, and how do you provide the access, and how do you provide the transport across the whole country. Right? So that relationship, so for the role of Thailand's tourism board is very different from Singapore. Their role should be also promoter, plus they must facilitate the access to other parts of the country. Because there are only 2 international airports well, 3 actually, Dong Muang, Suvarnabhumi, and Phuket.
Udon as well.
Okay. Yeah, but Phuket is also accessible international, so 4, right?
Yeah.
So you need to promote these gateways first, you see,
Yeah.
and then create from there what is the access from these airports to sub places, to sub destinations. So, and if you can do that, and that's, to me, that is the role not of the private operator. That is the role of the national tourism body. But in every part of the world, the national tourism body has no power in transport. Right? Number one, they have no power in not just in transport, but air traffic control, for example. They have they have most, maybe in Thailand you do have. In Singapore, the tourism board has no control over heritage and culture. But transport, heritage and culture, sports are all integrated with tourism. So why is it that many countries, they actually have 4 different ministries? You agree? So the larger the country is, the more important these 4 things. The smaller the country, the easier it is to only deal with one, like Singapore. So our as Singapore Tourism Board's role is very different from the one in Thailand. It is very different from the one, for example, in Australia, where you have so many different states doing their own things. So how does, for example, Australian Tourism Commission control the others or work with others? Right? I give you another example for a large country, maybe like US, for example. Right? You have got 59 states. So what does Tourism USA do? When you now go into labor law. The tour guides in this state cannot do tour guiding in this state, for example. What about licensing of vehicles? What about interstate vehicles moving and insurance liability comes in? Who controls such things? So the role becomes very different. So I always look at the access first, right? So I believe Thailand's tourism board has a different role to play, but it must start from access. It must start from how do I get this tourist into the country, and from this part of the entering in the country to the rest of the country. Because if he cannot access, he cannot travel. He cannot travel means he cannot spend the money in that particular city or the town or the village. And when that happens, tourism will not benefit that town. That's all. Access, number one.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.